In the quiet mansion overlooking the Nile lived a wealthy businessman named Adel al-Najjar, who had built his fortune through companies, factories, and ventures that made him one of the richest men in the country. Yet, despite all his wealth, he lived in a cold isolation, visited only by grief. Since the death of his wife 5 years ago, Adel had lost all passion for life. Left with only his only daughter Layla, once the joy of his life, now trapped in a body that refused to move or speak, a child frozen in time, watching the world with wide, silent eyes. Doctors from Cairo, London, and Paris examined her, all speaking with one voice. It's a rare neurological condition. There is no cure. Their words cut through the father's heart like knives, and he believed them, surrounding his daughter with care and sorrow, silently watching her day after day, waiting for a miracle that would never come. Over the years, the mansion changed. Sounds faded, laughter disappeared, and the rooms filled with the scent of medicine and memories. Then Janan arrived, a new maid in her 30s, a simple woman from Upper Egypt who had lost her infant son 2 years ago due to a medical error. Since that day, she had trusted neither doctors nor cures. She was quiet at first, observing without speaking, but she saw what no one else could. From her first days in the house, she noticed something unusual about Layla. The child's eyes were not empty, they flickered. A tiny movement in her fingers when a particular sound played, a tear falling when sunlight touched her face. These were not the symptoms of a hopeless illness. They were signs of a life trapped inside an oppressed body. Janan watched closely, noting the medications, the injections, and the nurse who entered the room daily without ever lifting her eyes from her phone. One evening, while cleaning the shelves, she noticed a small label on one of the medicine bottles, bearing the name of a foreign pharmaceutical company. It was not the medicine prescribed by the doctors. Doubt crept into her heart, and she began collecting evidence in secret. She would slightly rearrange the bottles to track their use and jot down the schedules in a small notebook she hid among her clothes. Weeks passed, and the horrifying truth became clear. What was being given to Layla was not treatment. It was a slow-acting poison. Her hands trembled as the realization hit. The little girl was not sick. She was being killed slowly, and the man everyone trusted, the private doctor, who had entered their home like a savior, was the real killer. But who and why? Layla had become a victim of a corrupt pharmaceutical company conducting secret experiments on humans to cover up a failed drug trial funded secretly by one of the country's powerful businessmen, a man named Salim al-Najjar, Adal's older brother. Janan had nothing but her courage and no allies in the mansion owned by a man who could see nothing beyond his grief. She began a dangerous plan, secretly altering the daily doses, replacing the poison with nutritious and soothing solutions. At first, no one noticed, but soon Layla began to move. Her fingers twitched, her eyelids fluttered, and one morning she let out a faint moan, a whisper of hope awakening from a long death. When Adal saw his daughter move for the first time in years, he thought he was dreaming. He looked at Janan with suspicion, but the woman did not waver. She confronted him with the facts she had gathered, the files, the bottles, the hidden reports. At first, he refused to believe, accusing her of madness, but when he confronted the doctor and saw him collapse under pressure, the catastrophe became undeniable. There was only one path forward: the confrontation. Adal filed a lawsuit against the powerful company, beginning a long battle against corruption and silence. They tried to threaten them, offered them money, but Janan did not falter. She fought for the little girl she saw as the daughter she had lost, for the justice she had never found. Layla finally spoke. After months of care, tears, and therapy, she whispered her father's name. That simple voice felt like a prayer, returning life. Adele wept, not for what he had lost, but for what had survived. He realized that the harshest illness had not been in his daughter's body, it had been in his heart, believing lies and surrendering to grief. In the end, the mansion was no longer a place of memories, but a home of life. On a balcony overlooking the Nile, Layla drew a small sun, while Janan told her the story of a little angel who had not died, who had returned in the form of a new smile. The next morning, Adele left the mansion before sunrise, the first light reflecting off the Nile as he drove toward the headquarters of Pharma Shark. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, eyes burning with determination. For years, he had lived in grief, believing in lies, but now the truth was clear, and nothing, not wealth, not fear, could stop him. The building loomed ahead, sleek and cold, glass and steel reflecting the city around it. Security cameras followed every movement. Guards patrolled the hallways, and the receptionist barely raised her eyes when he walked past, his presence commanding yet quiet. Adele had one goal: to confront Salim, his older brother, the man responsible for years of lies and suffering. He entered Salim's office, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Salim looked up from his desk, a faint smirk on his face, as if he had been expecting this confrontation all along. "Adele," he said calmly, "I suppose you finally realized the truth." Adele did not respond. His eyes never left his brother's face. "You poisoned her," he said simply. "You made her suffer for your experiments, for your greed, for your empire." Salim leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "She was an investment," he said lightly, as if discussing numbers in a ledger. "A necessary risk. You of all people should understand the cost of ambition." Adele's chest tightened. The room felt colder than the early morning outside. "An investment?" he repeated, voice low and sharp. "That's my daughter you're talking about, Salim, not a number on a balance sheet." Salim's eyes hardened. She was never meant to live this long. The delays, the interference, they ruined everything. And now you threaten to ruin me? Adele stepped closer, voice rising. "No more threats, no more lies. You will answer for this." At that moment, Janan entered carrying the notebook filled with evidence, the hidden schedules, labels, reports, photographs of the bottles. "Everything," she said, placing it on Salim's desk. "Everything you tried to hide. Every lie. Every poisoned dose." Salim's smirk faltered as he glanced at the documents. The color drained from his face. For the first time, Adele saw fear flicker in his brother's eyes, a shadow of the monstrous calm he had always maintained. The confrontation escalated quickly. Security arrived after the alarms had been triggered, but Adele and Janan stayed by the desk, standing firm as Salim realized that his empire of deceit was unraveling. He tried to deny, to redirect, but every document, every photograph, every confession from former employees cornered him. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Layla sat on the balcony, her tiny hands tracing patterns on the railing. She did not yet fully understand the danger her father and Janan were facing, but she felt a strange shift in the air. The sunlight reflected in her wide eyes, and for the first time in years, a smile tugged at the corners of her lips, a fragile, hesitant bloom of hope. Hours later, Adele returned home exhausted but victorious. Salim had been arrested, the company's operations frozen pending investigation. The weight on his chest lifted slightly, though the scars of betrayal and grief remained.
He approached Layla, and she reached out her hand toward him, whispering, Paka. Adele caught her small hand in his, tears brimming in his eyes. I'm here, my love. I'm never leaving you again. Janan watched quietly from the doorway, a soft smile on her lips. She had saved Layla, yes, but she had also restored hope to a father who had almost lost everything. And yet, as the night fell over the Nile, a quiet unease lingered in the air. The battle was over, but the world was still filled with shadows, and they all knew that peace, once lost, could never be taken for granted. And Layla, she had found her voice. But the story of her survival, the truth of the poison, and the legacy of betrayal were only just beginning to unfold.